All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Team SoCal webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Diane Matias, and I'm the Director of Junior Tennis for USTA SoCal. Appreciate you all joining us this evening. I know this is a super busy time of the year for everyone, so we really appreciate you hopping on tonight. Tonight, we're going to discuss how modern tools, whether it's equipment or performance data, how it can be used the right way to support junior development. Right now, there's so many different types of rackets out there, different type of strings. How do we choose what right equipment our players should be using depending on, as they're growing, as they're progressing through their junior development? And now with AI and the different tennis apps available, like how can we use all these technological advancements to help us with our junior players? We have an incredible panel this evening that's going to be sharing their insights on these topics. First, we have Matt Pravetti. Matt is a certified master racket technician and Selinko's resident equipment expert. He has worked as an official stringer for the Italian Fed Cup and at Indian Wells. He serviced some of the top players in the world, including Rafa Nadal, Sloane Stephens. He's also the founder of Unstrung Heroes, which is the largest online community for racket stringers and equipment specialists. Next, we have Swupnil Sahai. Swupnil is the co-founder and CEO of Swing Vision. For those who are not familiar with Swing Vision is an AI-powered app that delivers automated statistics, video highlights, and insights using mobile devices. It also has an ELC feature, electronic line calling, which we have piloted in some of our SoCal tournaments. Really excited with where that's headed. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll have it in more of our junior tournaments. And we're also joined by David Ninkins. David is a lead national coach with USTA, and he brings decades of experience as both a player and a coach. He played college tennis at UCLA and represented South Africa in Davis Cup competition and competed on ATP Tour. And he's coached numerous of our top American players, including Taylor Fritz, Marty Fish, Sam Curry, and Sloane Stephens. Nanks is currently based out of Carson at the USTA Player Development Center, and he's working with our top American men right now. Right now is preseason for them, so that's where you'll see some of our American men practicing. And last but not least, moderating our call tonight is Paul Annacone. Paul has coached numerous Grand Slam champions such as Pete Sampras, Roger Federer, Sloane Stephens, Stan Wawrinka, and is currently working with Taylor Fritz. As a player, Paul reached as high as 12 in the world in singles and three in doubles, and he is a longtime analyst with the Tennis Channel. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to get us started with our discussion tonight.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks to you guys, the panelists, for coming on, and also the folks for listening. Happy holidays to everybody. It's that busy time of year, so we really appreciate everyone taking a little bit of time. This topic for me is an interesting one, and it's challenging because there's so many different things that are going on in today's game. It's challenging to kind of compartmentalize and look at the different categories. So for us to have Swoop Neal and Matt and David with us, it's going to be great because we're going to get a few different kind of lenses to look through. We're going to look through some of the AI stuff that Swoop Neal has been so at the forefront of dealing with and developing. And of course, Matt can talk very intently and very intelligently about the different stuff that's going on biomechanically and all the different possibilities with rackets and strings and how best to kind of prepare our kids and what should they be using and why. And Nanks is going to give us a great overview just about the evolution of what he's seen kind of evolving through not only the junior ranks, but all the way up to the pro tour and how things have changed because it's a moving target. It's not something that has stayed still. And now with all the stuff that's going on, you kind of have to really keep your eyes open. I'm a big believer that coaching and development of players is a combination of science and art. I feel like if you just stick with the art, and by art, I mean one ball hopper, one racket, and a megaphone yelling at the kids on the other side of the net. If you just stick with that, you lose out on so much precious intelligence and information and opportunity to grow. Conversely, if you just rely on all of the technology that we have these days, it's really easy to get very wrapped up in stuff. And what we have to be careful of as kind of teachers and educators for our kids is we can get them to lose their instinct. Everything can become, too mechanical, too much of a math equation. Sometimes in tennis, you just miss a shot. That happens. It's not always because there's some big technical flaw, and sometimes you get fortunate. And so it's a combination of balancing that art and the science, which I think is really vital. So with that, I want to start with Swoopney a little bit. Can you just give us just a little bit of information about swing vision and some of the advanced AI stuff that's used these days and used on the Apple Watch or just on any other app, and how best players and their parents can use kind of a streamlined, simplified version of it?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, with Swing Vision, the way the app works is you set up your phone behind you, behind the baseline, so you get this nice angle of the court, similar to like if you're watching tennis on TV, and you just record the match. And then we've developed our own AI that will process the video in real time. So like as the video frames are coming in, everything is being tracked in real time, and so we'll track like the ball trajectory, we're tracking the lines on the court, the player movements. And so from that, we're able to gather a lot of data, maybe too much data, but it's like the speed of the ball and where's the ball landing and how accurate, like your returns, how often are they going in, your first serve, how often is that going in. So all those metrics are basically automatically tracked. And then the magic of it is not just the data, but the fact that we're cataloging everything that's happening. And so if you go back and try to watch a 2 hour match pretty much right after you're done playing, you actually only need to spend about 20 or 30 minutes watching it because all the time in between the points is removed automatically because we know exactly what happened at any given time. And then what's really amazing about Swing Vision is that we also add a scoreboard onto the video. So it'll try to like guess basically what happened based on in and out calls. And obviously it's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. And that's really helpful because then you can go back and say, hey, show me every break point that I lost, on my serve. And so it's really simple and easy to go and look at specific things. And more so than the data, and we obviously track a lot of data, but even as a parent or a junior, the fact that you can go back and look at specific moments, it just saves you a lot of time. And then it's also a good way to build on your intuition because if you're a player, you might have a sense during a match, like there's certain things you're struggling with, certain patterns of play, or certain points, moments, you can find those very easily. And another example is like I could say, show me every first serve that I hit into the net, and like it'll just show you those shots. So again, it's just like cataloging and kind of combining the data and the video together is really what makes it so simple and easy to review and understand.
That's great. That's a great synopsis. It's so interesting. You started off kind of half tongue in cheek saying we gather a lot of information, maybe too much. And I don't believe in too much information. And for parents and coaches out there, um, I think it's really important to realize that all information is good. The challenge is disseminating it and getting it to the kids, what's relevant and what isn't. So I think information is great, but one of the biggest keys to coaching is being able to take that information and try to streamline it and just give little nuggets so that the kids don't get overwhelmed. And with that in mind, Nanks, I wanted to ask you, what have you seen kind of in the last 5 to 7 years in terms of the gathering of all of the metrics and analytics and stuff, from juniors, David, all the way up to the pros? Are those metrics being used um, a lot more? Are the people that are delivering them trying to dumb it down to make it easier for the players? Nanks, what's been your kind of view for that?
Um, Analytics have become such a huge part of coaching and watching tennis. And, what's really stood out to me that we look at is the speed that the ball travels at. And that's a product and due to, the equipment that the players are using today. Um, so we look at, I mean, one number that jumps out at me is second serve returns and ball speed. And And Hawkeyes we know has rotation and RPMs and how much guys are spinning it. And just recently at the US Open, they were talking about what's changed over the last 5 years is the height the ball's traveling over the net, which directly correlates to how hard the players are hitting, which is a really interesting discussion. Has athletics become that much better, or is the equipment that much better? I mean, it's a question we ask ourselves amongst a lot of sports. So, we've seen some trends. Obviously, the biggest change was, as everyone knows, was 20 years ago when the sport introduced the polyester string. And maybe we're going to dive into it later, but the biggest change I've seen over the last 5 years when it comes to equipment is string patterns and tension. So across the board. So pros are stringing the rackets looser and they're all trying out a more open blended pattern to get more power, which correlates back to my speed of ball.
Hmm.
Everyone's looking for more power. How do I
Hmm.
get more power with, I'm not going to say less effort, but
Hmm.
there's an injury prevention phenomenon. Balls across the tour getting a little heavier for the most part, not every week, but that's a common theme as well. So I'd say rackets are lighter, the tension, the patterns are a little more open, and yeah, players are always looking for an edge, you
Right,
know.
right. And then Matt, just to speak on the back of that with the strings and string patterns and racket weights and stuff. What's kind of the biggest misconception for juniors, Matt, and their parents that perhaps they could kind of reel in to make it much more, look, let's be honest, when the kids are young, you want to make sure they're using the right equipment, they're practicing the right amount of time, they're not overplaying because it's very easy for kids that are growing to get hurt. What's one of the biggest misconceptions, Matt, that you see that's out there? And is there a primary way to kind of make recommendations for parents and juniors based on age or height or weight? What should they do? Did I lose him? Did I lose Matt?
Matt, you're muted.
Oh, how embarrassing. You're talking to David Nankin and Paul Anacone and Swoop Neal, and you're
We
muted
were,
on the
we were
call.
trying to read your lips though, Matt. I
Oh,
was I had
God.
my glasses on. I still couldn't read them. So
So I guess the best answer I would say I made four little notes of sort of things that I wanted to touch on tonight, and I think two of them you indirectly referenced in your question, and one of them is no one has the answers. So many junior parents and players are seeking the answers externally. They're asking the stringer. They're asking other players at the tournament. I've seen such a silly thing. You go to a tournament, your child loses to another kid, and they ask the other kid what equipment they used because that must have been the edge that they had. And while, again, I'll use a very vague term like while the answers exist somewhere, the only way you're going to find them is through experimentation. So, reading a lot, being skeptical, asking questions, those are all good to get you close to the answer. But any pro will tell you trial and error is how you figure out what enhances some things and diminishes others. And I think that would be the lasting impression I'd say is as much as Tennis Warehouse and brands are trying to get you on board the new thing, any one of those
Kebab,
players
pug.
go ahead.
any one of those players working with David knows they are the unique person that has insight into what works best for them and manipulating it.
Yeah, it's so much of that cliche, right? It's not necessarily the arrow, it's the archer, right? You kind of have to figure out what works. Or should parents, and look, even to this day, Taylor and I, Nanks, back at the day were so instrumental in helping educate me to go through Taylor's kind of journey from junior tennis to pro tennis. Even to this day, he still talks about string patterns. He has a pretty tight string pattern, so he doesn't get a lot of power easily. And more importantly, he doesn't get a lot of spin easily. So the wider string pattern with a little less tension gives the player more power and more spin a little bit more easily. Is there a formula, Matt, that a player, a junior, should think about, or is it really as simple as trial and error, even for the young kids?
I think there's a story that sums up an answer indirectly to what you're asking. And the story is about someone you know very well, and that would be Pete Sampras, who arguably is the most famous tennis player to ever be really stuck in his ways as far as his equipment. And he famously turned down, and I'm telling a story to Paul about something Paul knows well, but everybody else is hearing it for the first time. Famously turned down many, many millions of dollars of endorsement deals just to stick with this one particular racket that, quite frankly, led him to one of the greatest careers in the history of tennis. And then, and I can't remember the year, after he had retired, one of the coolest matches you can go and watch on YouTube in Madison Square Garden, Pete Sampras is playing Roger Federer in his prime. And it's a killer match. It's a three-set match. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And Pete Sampras, more or less publicly for the first time in decades, is playing with a different racket with polyester strings. And through the grapevine, one of the messages that he relayed to Roger after the fact was, if I had changed rackets, I think I could have won a whole lot more. And I think that's the answer for people. Even when you feel like you are stuck in a rut in a great way, you're loving your equipment, there's always more to extract. So keeping that curious mind could lead to new adjustments that lead to better results.
Yeah, and I think conversely to that, people, parents, you have to realize that be careful that your kids don't become they don't join the blame game. In other words, I'm playing bad because of I need a new racket because I'm playing bad. I'm not moving well because of my shoes. There's a fine line between using the technology and then letting it use you and you becoming a little bit living in denial. And I think that's really important to keep up with that because you have to keep an open mind, as Matt's talking about, but you have to be careful. And that's why it's important to talk to the coaches and the kids together so the coaches know the kids' games can really help point you in a right direction. Swoop, now I want to ask you a little bit about swing vision and what's the best way, and is it possible for juniors and their coaches to use it in real time? And is it pretty handy at getting at pointing out strengths and weaknesses so players can know what they're working with real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of real time, one of the most engaging things that we have is this like goal mode target practice feature. So you can set like zones on the court. So for example, if you're just like hitting, a basket of serves, you could set some zones if you're trying to hit a particular part of the service box, and then it'll play audio feedback in real time. So you can kind of choose how you want it to do it, but it can like announce the speed of the shot as soon as it lands. It'll give you like a running counter of your accuracy so far. So it's like you hit 15 out of 20 serves in so far. And so that's a fun way to kind of just understand your progress in real time. And maybe you want to set some sort of goal for yourself, like, okay, on this session I'm trying to hit a certain serve percentage or something like that. And so you could actually keep yourself honest, and get some of that feedback right away. And then also if you're trying to work on like pace, like David was saying, you want to understand like the speed of your return of serve. You could turn on the target practice for that, and then you can actually hear that speed in real time. So it's a way to kind of get that immediate feedback, and then your mind can make that connection with sort of like your technique and like the feel of it, but then also the data, and it's a a way to kind of calibrate yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's
And,
that's
and
that's one
that,
way.
that happens right as, I mean, you're saying as it's happening, right? Boom, boom, you
Yeah,
can,
it's like right after the shot's hit, it's playing it. So that's like the real, the most real time you can get, I guess.
yeah.
But stepping a step back from that, if you want to, the nice thing about Tunisian is like all the processing, everything's done in real time. And so like as soon as you're done playing, if you wanted to dive deeper, you can do that too, like right on the court. So like let's say you just got off of a match or you just got out of a practice session, you can go look at, heat maps of like where your shots are landing. You can go look at the video, like I mentioned before, and do some like self analysis of your technique, diagnose maybe what went wrong, look at pressure points, and so that's also pretty real time too. Especially like let's say you're at a tournament and you play a match right afterwards, you could look at what how that went, and then you actually understand what you need to work on, maybe even ahead of like the next match and on the same day itself. So that's also another, I guess, way of getting real time feedback as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly you can get that feedback. Thanks. I've been lucky enough to get a bunch of stuff from Dave Ramos in the last and his team, Jeff and those guys for many years about, Taylor's stats and how things are going. Have you noticed through all the stuff and all of the developmental work that you're doing at Carson, how many of the players are diving in pretty deeply to the analytics and how much do they use it and coordinate with their coaches?
I mean, I'd say there's a lot more data now on scouting due
Hmm.
to access to video and stuff. And what's interesting with the scouting with players, a lot of the pros want the direct matchups, like,
Hmm.
and we had an interesting situation right now where learner play, I can't remember who it, but Medvedev had changed coaches. So Michael Chang got a scouting report on Medvedev as the coach, and he read through it and he goes, well, this isn't that accurate because he's changed coaches. So he's playing differently. So it's pretty refined when it comes
Right,
to, I know with Taylor, he always wants the surface specific scouting report, and
right.
timelines are valid depending on game change, but the players definitely have more scouting now than they do. And then a lot of them want to, what's happening on break points is a big one. They want to know where the guy's serving and what are the tendencies. Not always accurate, but there's so many. I'd say with the analytics, the more specific players can be, the better if you know what you're looking for, because it's a
Hmm.
lot of data, as we know, that you can look at. So I think if with a player's identity and they can be more specific with what they're trying to find out from the analytics,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
very beneficial. And
Yes.
that can go, all the way down to whatever level. If you have a if you have video on a junior match, is what are you looking for?
Yeah, and that's
And
why
you
the
can be
stuff.
very, you can be
Yeah.
very specific.
That's why the swing vision stuff is so great. Not only can you be specific, you can be specific in real time. And it's amazing because when I talk to Taylor about stuff and I'll talk to him about a match and he'll be like, "Yeah, but that tournament, those courts were fast and we were using
Right.
Dunlop balls. The other tournament, it was Wilson and the courts were grainy and I couldn't get the ball to go anywhere." So that's why sometimes analytics and metrics in isolation don't always work because there's other stuff that's playing into it. But it's amazing to go into that genre and start to dig stuff out because it can be unbelievably helpful.
Yeah.
Matt, I wanted to ask you about racket specs and string choices. Are there things that, kind of like kids need to think symmetrically about, for instance, like pre-adolescence, you wouldn't want them to use a whatever, a really heavy racket with a tight pattern with a really dead string. Is there anything you can tell parents just in terms of the timelines and evolutions of what to look for in terms of racket specs and string choices?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that I want to tell people that I almost never hear anyone talk about in regards to junior tennis equipment, and that is discussing a detail that we call gauge of string. So the thickness of string that you use. And regardless of whether you use a soft string or a stiff string, the only benefit to playing with a thicker gauge, which would actually mean a lower number, is if you are tearing through strings. All of the other benefits performance wise come from thinner strings. And that's actually one of the reasons why I enjoy working with the brand Solinco is they
Mm,
make the thinnest strings. And my point being here is this. I see a lot of people go into a pro shop, request whatever their favorite pro tennis player is using. The pro shop doesn't know their game, to be honest with you, doesn't know their level, and oftentimes defers to the thickest possible string. That is like a major red flag in terms of enjoying the way that the string plays, the performance of the string, and most importantly, somebody's health of their arm and their shoulder, especially when you're a developing child. So going thinner gives you those benefits. The only reason you'd go thicker is if you're breaking a lot of strings.
right, and the thicker strings are the same as the old days. So when I used to coach Sampras, he used to use 17 gauge VS gut 122 on grass, and then he would use 125 on hard courts. And well, there was one time where he was using some 127 on clay
Hmm.
just because it would break, he would break strings at 34 kilos. It breaks like that. So I think it's important, and even though the synthetic strings now are thinner, what's their lifeline like?
This goes back to what I was saying earlier about nobody has the answers.
Right.
There are a lot of people that will tell you that strings go dead.
Hmm.
And while I think that there's a case to be made that they change over the life of their use, one of the things I try to coach junior players and parents into being aware of is that more details and more um, complexity is the enemy. So if your child only can play well when their racket was strung 1 hour ago by Joseph at this specific stringing shop, that's not suitable to being a player who travels and plays tournaments in
Right.
college and all that.
Right.
So I think there's this element of trying to play with the strings as long as you can. I
Huh?
don't buy into the injury is caused by playing with strings that have gone dead. There's no logic or medical doctor that's going to say that that's the cause. But I would say they play their best when they're freshest, is the simplest way to put it.
Right. And ha, ha, you have any clue in terms of the juniors? Any three you guys? How many juniors are hybrids versus just all synthetic? Anybody have any percentage ideas at all? Because I don't know. I thought I might from the pros, but I don't know. Matt, do you know or
Yeah,
nay?
I mean, I'll give you a statistic
Hmm.
that 100% of the boys at the 18s nationals at Kalamazoo's are all playing polyester.
Hmm.
Maybe 4 years ago was the last time I strung the boys 12 and unders, so the
Hmm.
other end of the spectrum, the clay courts, and it was about 75% of the boys were playing polyester.
Interesting. Full poly?
Yes.
Yeah. And string a little bit looser, right? To or
I think your point earlier about the pros is slowly trickling down, that the
Mhm.
pros understand the game is so competitive. If they can eke out a little bit more power or performance or spin from looser strings, that's an easy change to make as opposed to getting stronger or changing your technique. And we're starting to see that in the recreational game and at tennis clubs that people are going, why did I string so tight for all those years? I don't know. The stringer told me to. I don't know why.
Right, right. Next, are you noticing with the
Yeah,
players at Carson at all? Is anyone, now during the off season, are people tinkering with their tensions or anything out there? I mean, I've heard
yeah,
a
as
couple
Matt
players.
says, there's all the weather's a big factor when players do test rackets at Carson.
Hmm.
I always try and tell them, it's colder, the ball's not going to do as much. But players generally are they're trying different string patterns and tensions and gauge. I mean, really specific,
Hmm.
usually the most complex ones we have is the gut chain or gut trial,
Hmm.
which is probably the worst time to do it in cold weather. Matt, maybe you can do any of the 18s. What percentage of the 18s are playing any hybrid with gut? Do you know?
Yeah, I would say you're probably looking at about 10%.
Oh, that's not
And
bad.
and
Yeah,
interestingly enough, this is where the economics come into it. It's often the top 10% because natural gut is so expensive.
Right.
yeah,
And I'm sure you could imagine these more or less
yeah,
professional juniors are playing every single day.
yeah,
It's not sustainable unless you can get a full sponsorship.
right. Because when I see a young player with gut in the mains, and I will say do whatever it takes to stay that way for as long as possible because it's so hard to switch to gut as we know when you already established player because of the fireworks and it has to be strung perfectly and you'll have that bad day. But it's part of the reason why Taylor Fritz gets so much power. He uses a really thin gut in the main strings at a low tension, and he's never switched. He's played with gut in the main since he's young, and he's stuck with it. So I'll always encourage, cost wise. I mean, is that the best? If you were to have your dream setup in a racket, what do we got, Matt?
Good question.
So
Thanks.
this is getting very specific, but I think it's a question that's often asked, which is natural gut is so expensive, and you see this in so many of the top players, this natural gut hybrid with polyester. Is that the holy grail? And I would say for 99.9% of players, it is not. And here's why. Natural gut is an incredibly soft string. So when you put it in a hybrid with polyester, that polyester is going to slide and saw into that natural gut very quickly. That is the reason why those top players are changing rackets every 7 games, is because as the strings start to notch, the sliding breaks down. And so that little edge in performance that they get starts to go away. So if you play with it like a normal person for a week, it's very much changing over time in a way where even if you played with another string that was less expensive, you could get it restrung more often because it's $30 instead of $80. So if I'm Taylor Fritz, it's worth it. If
Right.
I'm, I don't know, Matt Praviti at the local club, it's probably too expensive.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Um, Swoop, Neil, can you tell us a little bit about what you see? Look, there's been so much conversation about AI and everyone's going to lose their job and everything else that's going on with AI. Um, Tell us what you see for AI and swing vision, in the next 3 to 5 years. How will it impact tennis and in particular the development of tennis for kids? Anything jump out in your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, definitely, some of those concerns are probably legitimate to an extent, but I think if you think about just the access to just getting close to that Taylor Fritz experience uh, for us amateurs. I think that's really what AI is going to enable. And so I think what Dan alluded to earlier is like the having line call electronic line calling, for example, right at the amateur level. That's just like we don't have enough officials to do that, and so it's like with Swing Vision, we'll actually be able to have a scalable solution where it's like any tournament, any amateur event, even UST League, Adult League, like all of that could be officiated just using your phone. And this can be done in any country. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter what kind of tennis infrastructure you have in that country. As long as you have a smartphone, you can get electronic line calling, which I think is just a huge paradigm shift. And so I think that's an interesting example of AI really kind of enabling access to a much better experience for everybody. And if you think about it, a lot of the roles of the officials might change. And so, instead of having to have an official on every single court, maybe you have like one or two roaming officials for the entire event. But now you might need more of those officials around the world. And so actually you might increase the number of people that you actually need to like have this new job of like, managing the ELC across an event. So I think it's an interesting opportunity, I think, to change the way people do their jobs in a way, and like roles will evolve. I think this will also probably apply to coaching. One thing we actually just launched this year is a coaching marketplace. So you can submit your matches to a coach, and they can actually annotate it remotely, leave comments, and that's all kind of embedded within your Swing Vision recording, and it's there forever. So that feedback is just there digitally forever. And so you could imagine as we build more AI tools to make that easier for coaches, they can actually review videos like really, really efficiently. They can serve a lot more students. They don't have to charge as much necessarily because they're spending a lot less time per video. And so I feel like longer term, there's an interesting remote coaching type of opportunity there where, again, a lot more students around the world can get access to like really elite coaching thanks to AI. And those coaches are able to reach a lot more players, and their job kind of evolves maybe in a way. So I think there's we try to look at it kind of in the optimistic way, but I think
Hmm.
it is bringing, I think, a lot more access. That's kind of the way I think about it. It's just more access to data or performance or or coaching, whatever you want to look at it. But that's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
how I
it's
see it
it's
going.
it's interesting. Have any of the manufacturers got involved in terms of, court manufacturer, tennis ball manufacturer? Because I'm just wondering, because we're always trying at the pro level to get consistency, and tennis balls are very difficult to get consistency with. Dunlop is so much different than the head, and the head's different than Penn, and Penn's different than Wilson. Do you know if any of the manufacturers have started to use any AE to look at any quality control stuff for balls or courts or anything like that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, not that I know of, but it seems like it should go there as well. Yeah, I always wondered why there was so much inconsistency with the balls, and you always hear about the professionals like kind of complaining about this ball change at a tournament, like completely changes everything, like you mentioned. It is a little bit puzzling why that happens. It feels like it shouldn't be that way. Um,
Yeah, you would think that the all the stuff, all the leaps and bounds we've gained with AI, you could probably do a lot in terms of getting quality control. When we use stuff, I know Hawkeye uses stuff to figure out how fast a court surface is, so they could
mhm.
probably use that to get it streamlined. Um, but I think it's interesting to me when you start to combine the AI just with the human touch and kind of the artistic coaching touch. And in that light, Nanks, I wanted to ask you, are you noticing any more coaches doing stuff on iPads, bringing stuff out to the courts to go through stuff with players while they're training? Is that still not happening that much, or is that something that happens afterwards?
Not during practices. I mean, during the US Open and the major events, they give the coaches iPads,
Mhm.
which, track live data. But it's, to be honest, it's really hard when you're watching as a coach to keep looking at I like to look at it holistically, maybe at the end of a set.
Sure.
And then again, I know what I'm looking for. I'm not just looking at the data. Generally I know what the trend of a match is, so I don't get lost in the details. So I find myself not looking at the iPad as much during a match because I'm trying to get a
Mhm.
feel of a bunch of different stuff. Certainly it comes out for maybe some technical analysis, but practices, not as much. I mean, not as much as you'd think in practices, I would
Sure.
say,
Mhm.
because players are watching and it's been videoed. But I would say at tournaments, there's definitely more live data for a coach to look at and has access to,
Yeah.
which tracks everything.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I was at during the year-end championships in Italy this year. I was sitting in the box right next to the player box, so I could actually look over and see their iPad to see where all the locations were and everything. And it's really interesting because it's very, while it's helpful, and you and I have done this together with Fritz for a long time, is that, if Taylor he'll till this day, he'll say, "Where's that guy like to serve?" And I'm like, guy's ranked 26 in the world. He hits all the spots pretty good. So, very rarely does that data become so relevant that they can only go to one spot regardless of circumstances.
Very rare. You're 100% correct.
And I think maybe in the juniors it might be more relevant. Little Johnny can't, and that's why it was interesting to hear some of the stuff that Swoop Neil was talking about because if it's happening you're getting stuff in the moment. You know exactly, Joey. You got to look. Stevie has not hit one forehand down the line in the first set, so you actually can learn a lot of stuff really quickly, which both can be detrimental and also hugely positive depending on how it's distributed to the kids. Um, Matt, let me ask you this. As a junior gets more mature, their technique and their physique get more refined, they get more predictable. Um, is there a common kind of evolution of racket and strings as you get older and stronger? You always use a heavier racket, you go to tighter strings. Is there a commonality that you've seen?
Yeah, it's a great question, and um, I think the simplest way to describe it is that everybody's different. Obviously, every player has different tendencies and skills. Surfaces bring out different strengths and weaknesses in people, but physics doesn't change. And so, if you were to be driving a dump truck and I was driving a tiny little Porsche and we crashed into each other, the dump truck wins every time.
Mhm.
And Diane, do you have that screenshot I sent to you earlier today? So I thought I'd take a second. This was just something fun I found when I was digging through the archives. So I'd worked with Brandon Nakashima as a junior. I'm down here in San Diego, as was where Brandon grew up.
Mhm.
And at the time, Brandon was playing with Chris Grow, who's at the Carson Center right now, my good buddy. And he said, listen, Brandon has incredible timing. I think this kid could really be world class. So will you come look at him and talk about his equipment? And so in 20, maybe 15 or 16, we talked about some things. And then in 2018, you can see in the chart on the left, uh, I had come to Brandon and said, kind of what are your goals? And he says, I want to win a slam. And at that time in 2018, I took what I think was all the guys who had won a slam since 2005 and called some friends of mine who are professional stringers, professional racket customizers, and got their racket weight and swing weight and compared them to Brandon's. And what you see in that chart on the left was that Brandon has the lightest racket by far and the lowest swing weight by far. On the right, in 2020, we had sort of finished what you would call phase one of bringing Brandon up towards a Grand Slam champion's specs. And you can see he's getting much closer. The reason Zverev is on there is I think he had lost his first U.S. Open match to Zverev that year, and so I threw him in there just as a direct comparison. Here's my point. What you can see here is that at the milestones of Brandon's development, technically, results wise, he's also adding weight to his racket so that what at the time was, quite frankly, an undersized teenager, a skinny guy at 17 and 18 years old, can hit a big enough ball to instill fear in the opponents and respect in the opponents. And quite frankly, I think that's part of why he was able to start competing at such a big level when he was, again, undersized. As you get older and you can handle more weight, you need to be experimenting with that if you want to be world class.
That's really interesting because Nanks Taylor's racket's unbelievably light too, and we talked about it for a long time, him tinkering back and forth. And players become such creatures of habit. It's really hard to get them to evolve and go away from it. But that such a lot makes logical sense. So you parents out there, just one of the things is be aware and careful as your kids are growing, and talk to people like Matt that know what they're talking about in terms of that journey, because there are going to be some good commonalities to tweak and change to get your kid a little bit more power, a little bit more easily without overstraining their body. And there's lots of different ways to do it. And remember, it's not always just the weight, it's the swing weight. Can you explain the difference, Matt, so people understand the difference between weight and swing weight?
Sure, sure. So, basically, there's three main specs of a racket, and I'll keep this brief. One of them is the balance point. Everybody likes to talk about balance point as if it's the most important, and it is the least important spec. So, if somebody does this, oh, look, your racket is perfectly balanced, you instantly know they don't know what they're talking about. The weight is just if we took your racket and put it on a scale, what does that racket weigh? The swing weight is so important, and I don't know if everybody can see here. I won't even demonstrate because I got my background blurred out. But basically, you don't swing a racket like this. You swing a racket where there's a point, an axis that rotates. This is your hand holding the handle. This is the tip of the racket. So how far away from the rotational point you place the weight makes a big difference. I'll use an example, maybe 20, sometime in the 20 teens. Nadal famously added about a gram of weight to the tip of his racket the week before the US Open, and I almost lost it. I melted down. What an insanely large change right before he goes play the final slam of the year. That should tell you how I feel about the swing weight. If you added a gram of weight in the handle, I guarantee you most players wouldn't even notice. So that swing weight has a big impact on how it feels and how it plays.
So if there's more weight in the head, is it easier to generate power, or if there's more weight in the handle,
I
generate?
like I like to use an analogy that I think most people can understand, which is that if you were to try and nail a nail, you're hanging a picture on the wall and you got to nail a nail in the wall and you used a hammer, which is generally pretty evenly balanced, that's pretty easy to aim and control that. If you were trying to nail the nail in with a sledgehammer, where there's an insane amount of weight at the end and the handle is very light, you would be knocking holes in your wall constantly. So we know that it can create a lot of destruction on the ball and a lot of force, but anybody who's ever experimented by putting some lead tape up on the top of your racket, you'll see very quickly it makes your shots often unwieldy and unpredictable.
Okay, that sounds good. Um, it's amazing because I'm thinking about these times, and it works in every sport. And just so everyone knows, this is why David Nankin's putting is really bad because he's got the wrong swing weight on his putter. So if he gets that
Yeah.
straightened out, he'll be able to putt better. Right, Nanks?
Yeah. Matt, can I, am I right? Can I tell a little story with Taylor? I went through this whole progress with the racket changes and head and they try to progress him as well. And he really, he struggled and we couldn't, it's an interesting case and maybe down the line, he's still using because, and I think it's because of his grip and the gut, right? That if we progressed him with a heavier swing weight in the racket head, he couldn't get around his forehand. So, but my point being is, I think it's depending on game style and grips and the way you play. Like nowadays, what I a little bit, and I don't want to contradict what you're saying, but a little bit with these players who are so wristy, I think it's hard for them to when we try to get them to go up, or you guys as the experts do, like with Taylor with gut remains and the grip. I actually, believe it or not, we did it 1 year without telling him. And he went to Wimbledon and had to just put it and he won't even know. And I think we put like 5 grams in the head, but not at the top. I think they put
Yeah.
him on the side. And he was, I mean, probably bad coaching, but he was so, angry. But he called it, he goes, it doesn't work for me. You don't understand. It just doesn't work. I want my old rackets back. So he went back to the old rackets. So
Well,
so
and
he's a unique case, I would say, of a
I
guy that
think David, you bring you. This is where this conversation becomes so fun.
because and head are like, they're like, what the hell is this guy doing, right? Using the same racket. But I think he's a unique case because of his grip and the gut.
And so the question that I think a lot of parents and kids could ask out there is when would have been the right time to get him adjusted to maybe a little more weight? And I think it's those teenage years
Yeah, yeah, I
where
would agree.
you're still adjusting technique, the player's still
Yeah.
open-minded. I think just a hunch as Taylor ages and his results inevitably, like everyone's do, declines. That is when you see a lot of players, Adrian Manarino comes to mind, who are like, I want to find some magic left in my game. Why don't we get extreme and try something I've never tried? And again, we heard it with Sampras after his retirement. We saw it with Federer switch to a bigger head size towards the end of his career. It could be down the road for Taylor.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you don't ever really know. It's just also the athletes are such creatures of habit. That's why it's really important when kids are young to get them to have enough confidence so that they know it's them. It's not what they're, wielding in their hand or the shoes that they have on, so that they can feel secure enough to make some normal adjustments that kids make through the developmental stages. Swoop Neil, what have you noticed? I'm wondering, because there's so much going on in the education these days. What have you noticed in terms of the collegiate programs in particular? Are they using more AI stuff? Are they using the swing vision? And what trends are you finding out about the collegiate programs and college kids?
Yeah, so we've done really well with the college market. I believe there's more college programs using Swing Vision than any other video solution at the moment. And you were mentioning iPads earlier, so it's actually become very common now where, especially if the team goes on the road and plays another team, like on the way back home in the bus or on the plane, they'll be just watching back their match right out like right after leaving the court, basically coming back. So it's become a routine, I would say, for a lot of the college teams, and the players just do this themselves. The coach will just hand them some iPads that they use to record the match, and they'll go back, watch the entire match, or watch specific moments, watch the pressure points. They'll kind of look at their shot selection, their pattern of play, like just consistency with like sticking to how they're supposed to be playing against that particular opponent or that particular playing style. So yeah, so we're seeing that it's becoming kind of the norm, I'd say, for them to at least look at the video. I think the data part is still, a bit much for some of the players to dig into too
Mhm.
deeply. I think that's something that we see probably coaches doing more of. Even then, it's probably only the really kind of the coaches who are like really into the data. But I think in general, the video though has been like the biggest part. And just being able to again like see those specific moments and also being able to make that connection with like the intuition of how you were feeling on the court, but then having that like confirmation in the video of like how you actually were playing, that is just it's such a big gap if you don't have the video. And so that's I think people are realizing like this is a must. I need to be able to actually see how I played visually to understand like what I need to adjust next time. And so
Is
that's
it something that's easy for non-tech heads to, is this something that parents can, can start to utilize and help self-educate so that they can, comprehend what's going on along with the coaches and their children?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we definitely strive to make it super easy to use, and it's very non-technical, I would say. It's like watching something on YouTube, I guess, Obviously,
Yeah.
there's like a little bit more controls to it because you might want to look at specific points, but we do kind of suggest the most commonly used filters. Like it's really common that people look at like those pressure points or people just watch their serves. Those kinds of things are quite common, and so we'll surface those as kind of like suggestions. But then if you want to be, a bit more advanced about it, you can go and customize how you're trying to watch it. Um, but yeah, that's something we're always trying to do, make it easier for somebody who's non-technical. That's really kind of our goal. And leave that to us basically. And yeah, so I think it's changing a lot. And I think like as AI gets better, it's going to be so much more personalized. So, we'll be able to tell based on your level, your age, where you are in your journey. There's like certain things that you're going to be looking out for depending on where you are. And so we'll be able to surface that a lot more automatically, I believe, over time.
Great. Next, I just got one more for you. I wanted to ask you, have you noticed any trends with the parents and the kids talking to some of your coaches that work under and with you about amount of play, competitive play versus practice for any of the younger kids? David, have you seen any change in that?
I mean, there's a pretty consistent model um, that players are, the players that do well and succeed and develop play a lot of matches
Hmm.
at a level that we have, as a norm, it's usually 80 matches a year.
Hmm.
Um, but the most important is probably playing at a level where you're winning. And it doesn't really change from juniors to futures to challengers to pros. Um, the juniors play a lot of ITF matches or before USTA matches, and that I don't think has changed much. If
Yeah.
anything, they may be playing a little more, but it's a high volume of matches, which I'm a big believer in winning matches and developing confidence. I think Learner Teen is an amazing example with the schedule from last year. Playing in the futures and gaining confidence. Great stories. He went to Bloomfield Hills, won a $75,000 tournament, and didn't change his schedule just because he won a bigger tournament. He came back to Lakewood and played the $15,000 tournament. And he gained so much confidence by, August last year. And that's, I think, why his ranking has gone up so much this year. He's played a lot of matches, and the guy, there's no real secret sauce. We actually have there's one magic number that we do have to get into the top 100 from, let's say, 300, and that's 50 match wins. It's pretty accurate at the
Oh,
challenger
really?
level.
Oh,
50.
really?
Every player that's 300 that needs to get to 100, it's 50. Pretty much, give or take. It's the same every year. So we use that model, the 50-30
Hmm.
50, 25. That's kind of the sweet spot. Of course, you have the outlier that does really well, and that's, not often. Usually
Right.
it's a lot of match wins, but
Right.
match practice is key. Not a lot has changed.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, it's amazing because it's the same stuff. It's volume, it's match wins under your belt. I mean, there's no better habit to get into than winning at any level. It's just and you mentioned Lerner. He's just a great example of what you can do when you're talented. And he just was meteoric about how quickly he went from one level to the next. It was really amazing to watch his progression. Well, look, guys, I want to say thanks. It's about that time. Diane, you want to jump on in and wrap things up? You got questions or stuff to throw at us, Diane?
Um, I'm going to open it up to everyone. Does anyone have any questions before we let our panel go? I do have one question for Matt. I know we have some kids that are traveling to Orlando and San Antonio for Winter Nationals. Any advice on storing rackets, flying with rackets, tension?
Ooh, good one. Good one.
Yeah, and my advice tends to go against what a lot of people who are professional stringers would say. Again, my coaching, if I was to leave you guys with one thing, we want to build players that are really durable in spite of all the chaos that's going on around them. And so, travel with your rackets however you like. Get them strung, either right before you leave or even when you get there, but don't allow people to tell you to change a million variables. Everybody on the Pro Tour strings differently, except for Nadal. Nadal strung the same way every time. Federer's changing things, adjusting things. Djokovic is changing. Nadal's staying the same. They both won a ton. So choose simplicity. I think that's going to serve you better in the long run.
Great. Here's a good question. When will Swing Vision come to Android? Oop, Neil?
Oh gosh. That's like the number one question we always get. Yeah, we're starting to work on it, so it should be next year. I know it's been a lot of delays from our side. It's just because we do like all the AI has to run on the phone in real time. That's just really important. And so it was a bit of a challenge to do that on Android phones until recently, but it's it's an eventuality. Like all the phones are going to get there. So yeah, we should be doing it in 2026. So getting there.
Great.
There's one last question, Matt. For boys 12s, should kids be using a full length racket and what weight?
It's a bit general for me to give you a specific answer to this. I would say that, yeah, it's acceptable to use a full length racket. I think I've had juniors in the 12 and unders that play with what I would call heavy rackets, and that took them a long time to build up to that. So that's kind of a bit much if you were to use a heavy racket. Again, I'm trying to keep this answer simple. Lighter racket means that they'll swing it easier, but like we said, the battle with the ball every time, if it's too light, may mean their bodies have to do the work, and that tends to put me a little bit on edge. So I'm hesitant to give somebody a yes, 100% guaranteed answer because I wouldn't want anybody to take my advice and be like, "You ruined my kid's shoulder." But
That's sage advice. That's perfect.
We'll give Matt will give everyone your information in case they have questions on customization.
please, I love talking about this stuff, as you can hear.
Sorry, one more. I'd love to hear about tension and how to decide. Is there a guidance on how much depth you get on a swing?
Can I take that?
Yes.
Because there was one thing I was hoping to share today, which is that we can blend both of these topics. There's a way that everybody here can use Swing Vision and AI to benefit your equipment. And here's how it is. Junior players hit balls that land generally around the service line. College players hit balls that land in no man's land. Pro players hit balls that land on the baseline. So you can use Swing Vision to track over the course of a match, generally, where are the groupings of my shots landing. If they're too short, lowering the tension is an easy way to get your balls going deeper in the court without having to change anything else.
Sounds good to me.
Well, everyone, Matt, Paul, Supnil, Nanks, thank you so much for hopping on. And everyone out there, we appreciate you for hopping on this evening. It's holiday season, so I hope everyone has a happy holiday, safe holiday, and we'll see you all next year in our 2026 webinar. And for the juniors that will be at the camp this weekend, I'll see you out there Saturday, Sunday.
Diane, thanks so much and
Yeah, thank
happy
you,
holidays,
Diane.
Thank you.
everybody.
Well,
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
thank
Cheers.
you. Good night.
Bye.